Welcome to the podcast today. I'm really excited to have a repeat guest with me, coming from the Netherlands. Travis, thank you so much for joining us again on the show today. It's an absolute pleasure to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be on here. Always reconnect. Yeah,
it's really nice because I know you do the same. Like, you work a lot with people across the world. It's quite nice to have someone on the same time zone, have a coffee both in the morning and and chat comfortably, not super early or super late, depending on where we're speaking to. So that's great. You have written one of my favorite books, and I genuinely mean that. I texted you as soon as I finished it, and I was like, dude, well done. Like, an amazing book. A book that I really believe is so pertinent to our time, pertinent to any time, but really what we're going through now in history. I think it's more important than ever. And you put a quote in at the start, and I just want to start with that quote by George Orwell. In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Why did you put that quote first? And what do you mean by that? And where do we need to start looking?
Well, I wouldn't have put that quote in there if this book had been released, say, many years ago. What your comment that it's so pertinent to this time, that's got to be the most popular feedback I get. And that's very telling, right? If we need this so bad right now. So I think the material, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I tried to make it like super simple so that no one has an excuse to not really get this and understand it. But this book, to me, is very similar to chiropractic. Whether you're using you're perfectly fine, symptom-free, chiropractic is still great. It is it's so good for you physiologically and your expression, your adaptation. However, it's also good in a crisis. I mean, it's always necessary. So this material, like restoring reason to discussion, to politics, to healthcare, business, relationships, whatever it is, it's always good. It just seems now that we look at the world just like it's so sick. Like sometimes society and culture has gotten pretty bad right now. And so now we're like, oh yeah, we definitely need it now. However, if we were studying this for some time now, for decades, then we would have prevented everything. So it's similar to like chiropractic. If we use it more proactively, we would never end up in these situations. But yeah, so we let ourselves go. Okay, finally, I need to see the chiropractor. Well, it's the same with this material, just as it is physiologically, so is it psychologically.
I couldn't think of a better actually thought to put that to. And the book is restoring reason and thinking about thinking, I suppose, is the best way of putting it. And you use some words in there that, the first couple of chapters, I had to really read it and read it again to understand it. I'm glad you put it in a way that I could understand, because being really quite dyslexic, I remember having debates, and I remember having debates with my brother, and he just used to crucify me. So I just had to pull out my fists. And I suppose that was a problem, and I can't wait to see him again. But you talk about reason, you talk about using trivium, and trivium being three-part: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And you give us different words to the point where you say you could use input, process, and output. But if you can maybe summarize it, and then we'll get into it, because I think my understanding from reading this and thinking about the world is the main thing I think we've lost is that logic. I think we're in a very dogmatic society, and I think logic is the missing piece. I might be wrong, but if you could maybe overview what trivium is and why restoring reason is so important.
Well, first, let me say we're on the same page. I agree with you. I do think logic is also the missing piece, because there's certainly no shortage of the first liberal art, knowledge. Like we're in the age of information, they say, right? So there's no shortage of knowledge. And certainly the third liberal art, there's no shortage of rhetoric, especially from our politicians and authorities. So in a nutshell, they were traditionally called knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. But once they became more like formalized in academia and stuff, early academia, when they were still educating us instead of schooling us, then it was called grammar, logic, and rhetoric. But I always just, if you want to understand it today, more millennial, what they're doing is it's really input, processing, and output. And that processing, that's what's key. And I agree with you, that's what's missing, the processing or the logic, the understanding in the middle. And I want to, before I lay these out, I've done this so many times about these three arts, but first I want to say the book was titled Restoring Reason for it has purpose, right? It's not replacing emotions or replacing feelings. I just want to restore what we are clearly deficient in. Yeah, both critical thought and heartfelt emotions are important. I'm not suggesting that one replaces the other. What I'm suggesting is that reason and logic has nearly been murdered in our society. It has become a victim, and replaced with thoughts and feelings. So what I'd like to do is restore what's missing, and that way we could actually get back to balance. But to answer your question, that first liberal art knowledge or grammar, that's basically how we acquire data. At the beginning, it's very empirical, just through the five senses as a baby, those first 7 to 9 years. And it's just you're downloading a database. And as you and I know, some of that knowledge, it may be correct or incorrect. But regardless, you have working input. And when that database gets to a sufficient point, a child naturally enters into that second phase. And that's logic. You begin to ask questions about the knowledge. You want an understanding of what you know. So first liberal art is knowing. The second liberal art is understanding. And where you and I also agree, this is the one that I think where the focus should be. This is the art that should be focused on. Because like I said, in the age of information, I can pick up my phone and Google just about anything, right? Whether it's correct or not, I don't know. But that's also why that second liberal art is so important. So you can check those things, because beyond empirical knowledge, you get to a point as you get older and you start practicing the second liberal art, logic and understanding or reasoning, you acquire a different kind of knowledge, rational knowledge. These are the two main ways that we acquire knowledge, which is just data. There's no conclusions. These are just statements. It's so then now we have empirical knowledge and rational knowledge. So our knowledge base is increasing. Hopefully it's not just a high quantity, but also a high quality. And then understanding is what we use to draw new conclusions. So while the first liberal art is about naming, identifying things, defining terms, and structuring a statement well, right? The order of those words as well. The second liberal art is constructing your arguments or claims, which has several statements, at least two of which are a premise, and then you have a conclusion. You may have hundreds of premises, or it depends on how robust the argument is or how complex it is. So the second liberal art is organizing and constructing your statements in a reasonable order that's consistent, congruent, sound, no contradictions. And there's a way to check that, just like there is math. That's what logic and reason really is. It's managing quality of arguments or quality of statements, where arithmetic is managing quantities, right? And then the third liberal art really is not concerned with correctness like the first liberal art. It's not concerned with truth values, truth or untrue, like the second liberal art. It's concerned simply with effectiveness. Like, are you an effective communicator? Do you effectively express what you know and understand? And that I find super interesting and something I work on. I know we had you out to talk to the team about using the power of the voice. That's something you used to talk about quite a bit. I'm also a big fan of Martin Harvey as well, because that, as you know, Tom, communication or wisdom, defined as the expression of what we know and understand. This is the point where like two minds meet, or like your mind, my mind, it meets the market or an audience. This is the point of contact. This is where like it's output, it's externalized. The knowledge and understanding, that was very internal. And so personally, I feel that the second liberal art is the most necessary. I have a growing, strong interest in the third liberal art as well now.
But I think that second liberal art, you talk about in 2 points, that the knowledge we acquire, with, I forget the two terms you use, the bit you acquire when you're younger, empirical, and then as you get older. And you think about society used to lean onto their elders to impart the wisdom.
Yeah.
And I love the saying, there's no basis more reliable than my own meandering experience. And I think that's something that's so lost and we just do not value anymore. Yet it was so important. Our race for science, follow the science. It's bullshit, really, when you think about it, because science is proving or disproving a thought,
Yeah.
and then leading you to another thought. It's never the start or the end.
Yeah. Really, you can think of science. It's just the science, very simply from Latin, science is to know. Science is the first liberal art. It is purely knowledge. That's it. That's it. So when someone says follow science, it's kind of ridiculous. It's like saying following the most current knowledge, which can be incorrect or correct. That's why instead of saying follow the science, if people really cared and really understood, what they would say is, instead of follow the science, they'd say conform to reason and logic.
And it's so true today, because you see, like, you put something in it was just a sentence, but I highlighted it. Control the quality of your mind. You put, and I sort of thought upon that, where to get your knowledge. And you think about that knowledge, and let's take science. The reason logic is lost, because social media goes, oh, I'll put this post up, I'll like it or I'll share it before I even put any logic to it. Don't even think about it, because, well, that's obviously truth.
Yeah.
There's no reasoning.
Yeah, that's the conviction bias. Social media is I'm glad you brought that up, because social media really is the master of eliciting conviction bias. If I can trigger your emotions, and this is what's happened, and probably why we feel the same about logic. It's been replaced. It's been replaced with emotion. Like, if I'm convinced, my conviction on something is so strong, my emotions are so strong, that's how people are now determining if something is true or not. And that is a grave error, because emotions, unlike logic, are unstable. That's their purpose. They're supposed to be shifting and changing day to day, dependent upon your environment, what and who you're interacting with. But logic does not. It is different. I'm not saying one's better than the other, but they serve different functions. And the function of emotion is not to determine the truth. That is logic and reason. That it is stable, reliable, reproducible. Emotions, they serve a different purpose, an equally important one, but it's not that. It's really, they're like an indicator of your relationship with the truth. They don't determine what the truth is, but they're constantly giving you feedback of how it's working for you.
I suppose it's interesting thinking about that, what we said earlier, that growth and how we should be learning from our elders. It's a very childish way of seeing the world, I suppose. Like, you're just relying on that emotion, because there's another thing you put in there. You put a quote by Samuel Johnson on integrity. Integrity without knowledge is weak and useless, and knowledge without integrity is dangerous and dreadful. And I see, when you just speak about emotion there, it is that lack of integrity to stop and go, where is the logic? Am I prepared to question what I'm told? Am I prepared to be wrong and speak truth?
Yeah, integrity means like complete or wholeness, right? To put it in terms people can understand, like the integrity of my house, the integrity of a ship you're sailing. You want that complete and whole, like no cracks in it. Like, the integrity must be maintained. And for the human mind, that's integrity means it's complete, it's whole. Your arguments, your claims, your knowledge, it's complete. There's no holes in your reasoning. That we have to have integrity. And for many people, that's difficult, because I see today so many actions that are incongruent with words, thoughts, right? People are acting outside of integrity rather than in integrity.
I think the world has been so built on emotion over these last few years. And it's so ingrained. It's so ingrained that people can't really see what's going on. So someone listening to this and thinking, what are these guys talking about? Where can people start to think, are they applying logic? Logic being taking knowledge or taking what you've been told and having a thought for yourself, is this true? Is this not true? How does this pertain to my life? How would I then speak that to somebody else?
Yeah.
How do people start to observe the world around them differently? What's some things that people can start to do to change this?
Man, what you just said right there, that is the first thing. Observe. It's hard to observe when you see right now, there's a lot of people very active on social media. They have like this activist, and they have a voice, and it's more important that they're seen as being virtuous rather than actually working on being a virtuous person. So the first thing is exactly what you said, observe. And to observe, you need to stay silent. You're not observing when you're speaking, right? And speaking or sharing your opinion, your thoughts, that's the third liberal art. Those other things should come first. And that begins with observation, critical observation. And so that's always comes first, even in the scientific method, right? Observation. Next, before you start drawing conclusions, what I would recommend is that people at the very least just become familiar with how the operators of logic work, right? If you were going to be a scientist, and we're talking now, like, hey, Travis, I'd like to be a biologist or chemist, physicist someday. Where should I start? Well, first, I'd make sure, at the bare minimum, that you understand arithmetic. Do you understand how addition, subtraction, multiplication, division work? Because those are going to be really important when you're trying to apply the sciences, right? So I would say the same thing about this. If you want to start thinking for yourself and thinking more clearly and having a bit more confidence or certainty that your arguments are actually reasonable and that they hold up, that you should, at the very least, before you begin constructing your arguments or evaluating someone else's, that you understand how the operators of logic work, like conjunction, disjunction, conditional, negation. These things are reliable, stable, repeatable. That they're not, how do I say, subject to fleeting emotions. Emotions are supposed to be changing. These are rules of reason, right? And when people understand that they'll be empowered. There's one voice of reason. Everyone has one voice of reason in their mind. There's not multiple voices of reason. However, I do have multiple emotions: joy, anger, fear, love, shame, happiness, right? You cannot let the multitude sit on the throne. That's chaos. It's the voice of reason, what can be trusted. That should be in charge. And the rest, those are trusted advisors: the joy, the fear, the anger, right? If we get that, we understand how the mind works, we know that those two things are separate, that helps a lot. One of the biggest problems is, and it's because of, it's been a big thing now, like self-help, guru, spirituality, which has a lot of good gems in there. Unfortunately, many of them are really focused on working on the emotions, which I think is, in Dutch we say dwelen met de kraan open. How do I say it? Like mopping with the faucet on. You're just wasting your time, brother. Right? Because emotions are automatic. They're automatic, man. We're blessed that they come in, it's an emotional reaction, but we have thoughtful responses. This is the point where we have control. Emotions are automatic, but for critical thinking, this is an active process. You have to activate that. We can mitigate emotions and manage their impact, but you can't turn them on and off, which, by the way, back to what you were saying, this is exactly why we are so emotionally triggered right now, because for several years now, that's what's been put on the pedestal: emotions, emotions, emotions. Right? This is the society we live in now. Like, my feelings are more important than actual logic and reason. That's why we're where we're at right now. People don't understand this. Just because we can think and we can feel, and they're both mental components, that doesn't mean they're the same. I have multiple physical components. They're not the same. The heart and the lung have two different functions, right? Just because they're both physical doesn't mean they're doing the same thing, and I should not confuse them. So, okay, same with conscious, memory, emotions, thought. All these are mental, non-physical components that also have very specific functions. And if we confuse those, that can be a problem. Just like if a doctor were to confuse the heart and the lungs, you'd have a problem.
Yeah. It's I think it's interesting, and you touched on there, and going back to one of the things that's very hard to overcome. And we talk about chiropractic, and you can see the same in this profession. This, and you said it right at the start: education versus schooling, and just being told what's what.
Yeah.
And you see the I remember going through chiropractic training 12 years ago now, and getting into the clinical year and not being able to apply what I'd learned to a person in front of me, because I had no logic built into it. I just was told this plus this should equal this, and it didn't, and it doesn't. And
well said. Well said. I like that you said chiropractic training, because that's an appropriate term, right? And I'm not saying that schooling and training is bad. Like, as chiropractors, I need these skills. I need to be trained. A pilot has to be trained. What's missing, though, is, and unfortunately in chiropractic school, what you're saying, where's the understanding, right? I was trained really well. I went to chiropractic school to get chiropractic schooling, not chiropractic education. Chiropractic education is missing from the schools. And that's what I think that's what you're referring to. Where's the understanding of this knowledge? It was just knowledge, correct or incorrect. I'm not going to debate that right now, but that's all we got. We just got knowledge, and we did not get, in my opinion, a thorough understanding.
Yeah, you're pertaining to why we're doing what we're doing. Why are we applying a force to a body? Why are we choosing to interfere with this body that has an ability to heal itself?
Yeah.
Dogma is something that is thrown around a lot, and I think dogma has been used to belittle fringes in society, when maybe those fringes are actually using logic more than those accusing them.
Yeah.
And rhetoric has a really dirty connotation in modern society, and some people might confuse the two as being the same.
Yeah.
What is the difference, and how can we look out for dogma?
Well, I would say a dirty trick of rhetoric is projection, which a great example is dogma. It's often many people who are dogmatic, what they'll do, and you see this same strategy in so many other places too. So if someone understood the strategy, they could begin to find it almost everywhere. But here's what you do. This is called projection. It's a great tactic or strategy, or I wouldn't, let's say, it's great if you're malevolent or nefarious and you're looking to deflect. But a dirty trick of rhetoric is projection. That is, you'll find that the most dogmatic people, they accuse others of dogma. Right? See, that puts all the attention off me. Now, the other party is in the position to defend themselves. That's what makes that such an effective tactic, right? If I'm being a bigot, I just call Tom Waller a bigot. And look at him, he's got to defend himself. I'm off the hook, as long as I'm the one accusing and pointing the finger, and I never let up. I just keep, this is like politicians. They'll never answer it's a miracle when they answer any question. Then to defend themselves, right? So this is a very popular tactic called projection. And that is a great example of a rhetorical strategy that I don't recommend using, but one that you should be aware of so you can defend yourself against it, along with many others: appeal to emotion, appeal to authority, social conformity, tradition, all that stuff. But dogma can be good or bad. It seems that it gets, just like rhetoric, which can be good or bad. Dogma, like rhetoric, can get a bad context, right? Dogma, what if that dogma was like conform to reason? Then I'd say that dogma is good. Mm-hmm. If that dogma like conform to emotion or appeal to authority, I would say, well, that's not very good. There's some things are neutral in the world. Something like I would say murder or rape or theft, always bad. But there are some things that are just neutral, right? That like the people say, oh, television, get rid of your TV. Man, that's just a box of plastic, glass, and wires, and it's not good or bad. What you're viewing through it may be good or bad, may be harmful or helpful for your mind, but the TV itself is just this object. A hammer is good or bad. It depends what you're using it for. You smashing the windows out of your neighbor's house, that's bad.
Yeah.
You building a home for the homeless, good. And rhetoric and dogma, I would say the same thing.
So if you mentioned there like that passing the buck on, the difference between standing for something and fighting against, do you think, because it's really difficult at the moment, you know, where we come from and what's going, everyone's trying to fight against someone else. And sometimes coming to that fight with reason, people don't even see.
Yeah.
Do you think we should be focusing on what we stand for and moving forward in that direction? Or should we be trying to fight against and holding others accountable to what's happening?
I think there's two different approaches. I think we should push forward what we know to be true and of value. You know, pushing what you're for, you should be externalizing that. What you're against or what you know is harmful to yourself or your community or neighbors, you should definitely have an awareness of it. You should know and understand threats. Like this is normal in the wild too, right? You want an awareness of the threats. However, that's not what I'm going to be speaking about all the time. That's not what I'm always focused on. I simply need an awareness of it, not that it consumes my day to day, right? What consumes me is what I'm passionate about. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And all this is for the profession, for chiropractic, for my colleagues, or for me, or for my family. I'm doing these things for them, not against all the enemies and blah, blah, blah. I really think Buckminster Fuller had it best when he's like, you know, you don't have to destroy what's broken, just build what we need, and the bad old stuff will fall away. I really think that's how it goes. That's how it works in nature, right? It comes along, what's no longer of value dies off, erodes away, decays, universal intelligence breaks it, right?
Yeah.
So we just need to construct. We should be more like innate intelligence, creative, building things, building complex structures that serve and are in alignment with nature. Work towards those, but be aware of what is destructive.
I love it. I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I think we could go on for hours and hours, but I really want people to go and get Restoring Reason, an incredible book. Where can people get this from, Travis?
The best is like, because maybe you want to see if it's for you. So I would just go to restoringreason.com and you can download the first chapter for free. You know, Tom, it's written pretty easy language. It's not complex. So if you like it, then you can also order it from there. There's like an Amazon link.
Yeah.
But that's what I tell people. Don't buy it right away. Download the first chapter. If you like that, then definitely get the book. And hopefully together, more of us can restore reason to not just politics, healthcare, business, relationships, but like this, we can restore reason to discussion, and that we don't get worked up, and we can look for solutions, and together we all benefit.
You know what I love? What you've done there is you've allowed people to apply their logic to when they want to buy the book. I love that. Towards the very end of the book, you say something. You say, you can't have freedom without taking responsibility for your own mind. What parting wisdom would you like to leave our audience with, Travis?
The same thing I tell people all the time. Everyone wants a better life. So if you want a higher quality life, then you must work on the quality of your mind, because the quality of your life depends on the quality of your actions and decisions. And those come directly from the quality of your thinking. And if you're not taking charge of it, you're not nurturing it or cultivating it, I assure you someone else is. You just may or may not see it, and it may or may not be to your benefit. So if you really want freedom, then you've got to take responsibility for the one thing that is more powerful than anything you've ever had, your mind.
I love it. Travis, thank you ever so much for taking the time to join us today. It's been such a pleasure.
My pleasure, Tom. Thanks for having me on again.